Welcome to our channel. We hope you enjoy listening to the story. The planet was nothing like the one Ryker Talon had expected. From the moment his ship entered the atmosphere, a sense of unease settled in. What was supposed to be a routine hunting mission turned into a nightmarish experience. Ryker, a seasoned intergalactic hunter, had traversed countless worlds, but this one was different. The land was harsh, and the wildlife was even more unpredictable. The skies were always shrouded in a dull orange haze, casting an oppressive gloom over the barren plains below. And now his ship was barely functioning, wrecked, stranded, and leaking coolant from a damaged engine. Ryker stood at the edge of his ship, the wreckage strewn across a rocky outcrop like a broken, discarded toy. The crash had been violent, too violent for his taste. But that was the price of taking risks. He had always pushed the limits, hunting creatures that no one else dared to approach. But now he was on a planet far from help, with no viable escape route in sight. His comms were down, and his ship's engines were dead. The emergency beacon was useless. The only hope now was to salvage what he could and find his way back to civilization, if there was any civilization left on this forsaken planet. The landscape before him was a vast desert, a mixture of dry dust, jagged rock formations, and twisted alien vegetation. The air was thick and dry, and every breath felt like inhaling sandpaper. Ryker took a moment to assess his surroundings, scanning the horizon for any signs of life or any threats. A deep, gravelly growl echoed from the distance, and Ryker's instincts kicked in. He moved swiftly, his body trained to respond to danger, but his exhaustion was catching up with him. The crash had left him with bruised ribs, a twisted ankle, and several cuts from the jagged edges of the wreckage. His body was sore, but it wasn't his first brush with injury. If he had to, he could push through. He always did. The growl grew louder, and Ryker instinctively reached for his blaster, his fingers brushing against the cold, familiar metal. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. He crouched low, using the broken pieces of his ship for cover, and peered out. His sharp eyes scanned the dusty plain ahead, and then he saw it. Two massive creatures, their bodies cloaked in scales that shimmered like obsidian under the dim light. They were predators, and they were closing in on him fast. Ryker cursed under his breath. He'd made the mistake of hunting on a planet already occupied by dangerous creatures, but he had underestimated just how vicious these beasts were. They weren't just mindless animals. They were intelligent, predatory, and deadly. His chances of survival were slim if he couldn't outsmart them. In a swift motion, he dropped low to the ground, crawling towards the wreckage to use it as cover. His mind raced, calculating his options. There was no way he could outrun them. He'd have to fight. He could feel the pressure building in his chest as the creatures drew closer, their growls vibrating through the sand beneath him. He had one shot at this. His fingers danced over the control panel of his blaster, adjusting it to a stun setting. It wouldn't kill them, but it might buy him enough time to escape. But just as he prepared to take the shot, a sharp crack echoed from behind him. Something was coming up from the rear. Before he could react, a third creature lunged from the shadows, its claws slashing across Ryker's shoulder and throwing him to the ground. The impact knocked the wind out of him, and pain shot through his body as he struggled to regain his footing. His blaster fell from his grip and skidded across the ground, just out of reach. The creature loomed over him, its jaws opening wide in anticipation of its kill. Panic surged in Ryker's chest, but his training kicked in. He didn't have time to think. He needed to act. The creature snapped its jaws shut just inches from his face, and Ryker used every ounce of strength he had to throw his elbow into the creature's side, causing it to stumble back. Gasping for breath, Ryker scrambled to his feet, pain shooting through his injured leg. He had to get to the blaster, or he was dead. With a grunt of effort, he limped toward the weapon, using the wreckage of the ship for support. The predators were closing in again, and time was running out. The blaster was within reach, but just as he grabbed it, the largest of the creatures lunged at him, slamming him into the dirt. His vision blurred from the impact, and for a moment he thought he was done for. But then something strange happened. A sudden shift in the air, a ripple of energy, and the creature froze in place. Ryker's eyes widened in confusion as he watched the massive predator hover in midair, its body suspended by an unseen force. The other creatures stopped as well, their movements sluggish and disoriented. In the distance, Riker saw a figure, a silhouette against the dim light of the horizon. A woman. The figure approached, and Riker's heart skipped a beat as he saw her clearly, a tall, graceful being with glowing silver eyes. Her appearance was unlike any species he had encountered before. She was alien yet not entirely unfamiliar. There was a certain elegance to her, a calmness in the midst of the chaos. She extended her hand and the creatures dropped to the ground, motionless, as if time itself had frozen them. Riker watched in awe as she walked towards him, her eyes fixed on his injuries. Her presence was both soothing and unnerving, and the air seemed to shift around her with every step she took. "You're lucky I found you," she said, her voice soft but laced with an authority that made Riker's chest tighten. "You would have died if you stayed out here much longer." Riker, still panting from the ordeal, stared at her. "Who are you?" "I'm Ilaria," she replied. "And you are far from home, Hunter." Riker's gaze flicked to the lifeless bodies of the creatures that had nearly killed him. His heart was still pounding, but now a new kind of fear filled him. What kind of being was she? And what kind of power did she possess to stop those monsters in their tracks? "I'm Riker," he muttered, struggling to stay on his feet. "I didn't expect a savior." "You're not safe here," Ilaria said, her tone serious as she looked at the still creatures. "This planet is dangerous, and you will not survive without help." Riker's mind raced. He didn't trust her, not yet, but his options were limited. She was offering help, and for now, that was all he could ask for. "I'll take my chances," he said, wincing, as he tried to stand straighter. Ilaria studied him for a moment, then nodded. "You'll need more than luck if you want to leave this place alive. Follow me." And with that, Riker found himself following a stranger on a hostile planet, unsure of whether he was stepping into salvation or even greater danger. But for the first time since the crash, he felt a strange sense of hope, mixed with the nagging suspicion that this was just the beginning of something far more complicated than he could have ever anticipated. The trek through the alien landscape felt endless. The ground beneath Riker's boots was uneven, composed of sharp, jagged rocks and patches of sand that seemed to swallow his steps. He followed Ilaria without question, though a part of him was still unsure about trusting her. She had saved his life, but he had learned the hard way not to trust anyone too quickly, especially not someone with powers he didn't understand. The strange way she controlled the creatures and froze them in time made his skin crawl, and the ease with which she did it only intensified his wariness. As they walked, Ilaria remained ahead of him, her steps light but confident. Her long, silvery hair fluttered slightly in the wind, but there was something otherworldly about her. The way she moved, the way she carried herself, as if she were part of the planet itself, unsettled him. There was an aura of power around her, almost palpable. Her eyes, glowing a faint, ethereal silver, never seemed to rest, always scanning the horizon, always alert, as though she could see more than what was in front of her. Riker couldn't help but observe her, his instincts telling him to be cautious. He had been around many kinds of people during his years as a hunter, but none had ever made him feel this uneasy. And yet, there was something undeniably magnetic about her, something that drew him in. He had survived countless hunts, but this was the first time he was unsure if he was the hunter or the hunted. "I don't know what your deal is," Riker said, trying to break the silence that had hung between them since they started walking. "But you can't just go around freezing creatures in time. That's not something anyone should be able to do." Ilaria stopped, turning to face him. Her eyes were unreadable, but Riker could see the faint flicker of something behind them. A deep sadness, perhaps, or the weight of secrets she had carried for far too long. "I didn't ask for this power," Ilaria replied quietly, her voice soft but firm. "It's something I've had since I was a child. It's not a gift, it's a curse, and it's one that I've been running from my entire life." Riker's brows furrowed. "A curse? How can you say that? You just saved my life with it." Ilaria looked away, her gaze drifting toward the horizon. "You don't understand. Time manipulation isn't like any other power. It isn't something you can control without consequence. Every time I use it, I risk losing a piece of myself. I risk tearing apart the fabric of reality itself." Riker paused, unsure of how to respond. He had no idea what it meant to have such power, to hold the fate of time itself in your hands. All he knew was that he was alive because of her, and for that he couldn't dismiss her so easily. Why did you help me? Ryker asked. You don't owe me anything. Ilaria hesitated, her gaze lingering on the ground. I don't know. I saw you out there, alone and hurt, and for some reason, I didn't want to leave you to die. Maybe because I know what it's like to be alone. Ryker could feel the shift in the air between them. There was something raw, vulnerable, and unexpectedly human in her voice. It made him want to ask more questions, but he sensed she wasn't ready to reveal everything just yet. They continued walking in silence for a while, the desolate landscape stretching endlessly before them. Riker's thoughts wandered, his mind swirling with questions about this alien woman and her mysterious powers. But his exhaustion was catching up with him. His body ached from the fight, his ankle still sore from when the creature had attacked him, and the heat from the sun overhead was beginning to wear him down. We should stop soon, he said, his voice tinged with frustration. I need to rest, and you haven't even told me where we're going. Ilaria glanced back at him, her eyes softening just slightly. We're heading to a safe place. It's a long way, but you need shelter if you're going to survive. Safe place? Ryker asked. Sounds like a damn myth in a place like this. I'm not telling you where it is just yet, she replied, her voice serious. If I do, you might think it's a trap. I'm asking for your trust. Trust from the guy who's been stabbed, shot at, and chased down more times than he can count? Ryker shook his head, grinning despite himself. Good luck with that. Ilaria said nothing, but her lips curled up into the slightest smile. It was a fleeting moment, gone as quickly as it appeared, but it made something stir inside Ryker, a curiosity that he couldn't quite explain. They stopped near a small outcrop of rocks, and Ilaria began to set up a temporary camp. Ryker watched her movements closely, noting the grace with which she moved, the fluidity of her actions. There was a calmness in her that felt unnatural in the midst of such a desolate, hostile environment. She seemed like someone who had been here before, who understood this planet in a way that he couldn't. As the evening sun dipped below the horizon, Ilaria sat by the small fire she had started. The flames flickered, casting shadows across her face. Ryker sat across from her, resting his back against a large stone, still deep in thought. I still don't get it, Ryker said after a long pause. Why stay here on this godforsaken planet? Why not leave? Why help me at all? Ilaria's eyes glowed softly in the firelight, and she looked at him with an expression that was almost too complex for him to decipher. I told you already, I'm alone. This power, it isolates me. The people of my world, they don't understand. I tried to control it. I tried to hide it, but I can't escape it. Ryker frowned, his mind racing. You don't have to hide it, you know. I'm not gonna judge you. Ilaria's gaze hardened, a hint of defiance flickering in her eyes. You don't know what it's like to be ostracized, to be feared because of something you can't control, to know that if you make one wrong move, you could destroy everything. Riker's frown deepened as he watched her. You're not that person, Ilaria. You don't want to hurt anyone. Her eyes flickered toward him, the faintest sign of vulnerability creeping into her gaze. You think that matters? It doesn't. It doesn't stop the power from being dangerous. For the first time since meeting her, Ryker saw the weight of Ilaria's burden. She wasn't just an alien with strange abilities. She was someone who had been shaped by her past, by the fear and rejection of her people. And in that moment, Ryker realized that, in some strange way, she was just as much a victim as he had been. Of her own power, of her past, of the loneliness that haunted her. I don't know what it's like to have your power, Ryker said softly, but I do know what it's like to be alone, to feel like you're on your own, with no one to trust. Ilaria didn't respond immediately, but the way she looked at him made him feel like, for once, he wasn't the only one carrying the weight of the world. The night stretched on, but the distance between them seemed to lessen, if only just a little. Ryker didn't know what the future held for him and this strange alien woman, but for the first time in days, he felt like maybe, just maybe, they could survive this together. At first, Ryker didn't trust her. His life as a hunter had taught him to be wary of anyone who could manipulate reality, and the sight of Ilaria's glowing eyes made his instincts scream danger. But as his body healed and he became aware of the environment around him, Ryker realized that he had no choice but to rely on her. The planet was hostile, and the creatures lurking in the shadows were far too dangerous for him to face alone. Ilaria, on the other hand, was hesitant to reveal the full extent of her powers. She had always kept her abilities hidden, even from herself, fearing that one wrong move could undo everything. But with Riker's life at stake, she had no choice but to trust him. Together they set out to find a way off the planet, but their journey was fraught with peril. As they traveled through the harsh landscapes, Riker and Ilaria encountered terrifying creatures and treacherous terrain. Every step they took brought them closer to danger, but it also drew them closer to each other. The journey through the alien planet was grueling. The sun barely pierced through the thick, dusty atmosphere, casting an eerie orange hue over everything. Riker's physical wounds had healed thanks to Ilaria's time-bending abilities, but his spirit was still broken. He was a hunter, used to working alone, but now he found himself dependent on Ilaria's strange, mystical powers. The bond between them, forged under the weight of survival, was starting to grow more complex, but Riker couldn't shake the feeling that Ilaria was hiding something. One evening, as they set up camp near a strange, shimmering rock formation, Ilaria sat by the fire, her eyes distant. Riker studied her, wondering what secrets she was keeping from him. The flickering firelight danced across her face, highlighting the deep scars in her expression. There was something profoundly sad about her, something he couldn't quite understand. "I've never met anyone like you," Riker said, his voice cutting through the silence. Ilaria's gaze shifted to him. "What do you mean by that?" "You're different. You act like you're not afraid of anything, but I can tell you are. You carry the weight of something you've done, or something you're hiding." Ilaria's lips tightened into a thin line. She looked away, her eyes lost in the stars above. "I've lived a long time, Riker. I've made decisions that I can't undo." Riker didn't press her further, but the curiosity gnawed at him. As the days went on, Ilaria became more distant, her demeanor colder. But when the two of them were cornered by a pack of vicious, four-legged predators, Ilaria was forced to confront her fear. She bent time to protect them, slowing it enough for Riker to escape their clutches. Yet in that moment, he saw the dark toll it took on her. Her face contorted with strain, and for a brief second, he thought he saw her break. It wasn't just the physical cost, it was the emotional burden she carried with every use of her power. "Why didn't you tell me?" Riker asked, after the fight had ended, his voice raw with concern. Ilaria looked at him, her voice soft yet firm. "Because I can't control it. Time is a force that has no mercy. Every time I use it, I lose a piece of myself, and I don't know how much more I can give." Their journey led them to an ancient, crumbling city, an enormous structure built into the side of a mountain. The architecture was alien, unlike anything Riker had seen before. The stone pillars were adorned with strange symbols, and the air hummed with an energy that felt both familiar and alien. Ilaria seemed unnerved as they entered the ruins, her pace slowing as if the place carried some kind of invisible weight. "This place, it's the heart of my people's downfall," Ilaria murmured, almost to herself. Riker raised an eyebrow, sensing the gravity of her words. "What happened here?" Ilaria paused, her eyes scanning the ancient walls. "The Jartha tried to control time. At first it was for peace, using time to prevent wars to save lives. But power corrupts, Riker. It always does. They tried to harness time to dominate their enemies, to rewrite history itself. The results were catastrophic. They wandered deeper into the ruins, eventually finding a chamber filled with holographic projections of the past, ancient records of the Jartha. The images revealed a once great civilization, using time manipulation to control the flow of events, to prevent death, to alter the fabric of existence. But the records also showed the consequences. Entire timelines erased, countless lives lost, and the birth of the time anomaly that led to Ilaria's exile. Ilaria's hand trembled as she reached for one of the holograms, her face pale. "I was supposed to stop this. I was supposed to be the one to protect them, to prevent them from repeating the mistakes of the past. But I failed." Riker stepped closer to her, placing a hand on her shoulder. "You didn't choose this. You didn't bring them to ruin. But I was the one who let them believe they could control it," she whispered, her voice breaking. "And now I'm the one they blame." A heaviness settled over them as the truth of Ilaria's past unfolded. She wasn't just an outcast. She was the sole survivor of a civilization that had destroyed itself because of the very power she now struggled to control. The weight of that realization hit Ryker harder than he expected. "You can't carry this alone," he said quietly. "You don't have to," but Ilaria's face was resolute. "I have to, Ryker. I always have." The moonless night cast a heavy shadow over the landscape as Ryker and Ilaria crept through the rocky outcroppings, their breaths ragged from the constant vigilance. The air was thick with the scent of dust and the faint hum of distant electricity, the kind that signaled danger. Ryker's heart pounded in his chest as they neared the clearing where Ilaria's people had set up camp. The weight of what was about to happen hung over them like a storm cloud. Ilaria had told him that the Jartha were coming, warriors from her own species who had tracked her down after she had defied their ancient laws. Riker's instincts screamed that they were not just coming for her, they were coming for him too. And if they thought he was merely an outsider, they would learn that he was more dangerous than they could imagine. The ground beneath them vibrated with the faint tremor of boots hitting the earth, a rhythm of soldiers closing in. Ryker motioned for Ilaria to stay close. They crouched behind a rock formation, out of sight, listening as the Jartha soldiers marched past. Their metallic armor glinted in the faint light, each step purposeful, controlled. The clink of weapons echoing in the silent night. Riker's hand gripped the handle of his blaster, but he knew it wouldn't be enough. These Jartha were unlike any soldiers he had ever faced, each one trained to deal with enemies far more dangerous than the usual bounty hunters or beasts. They were deadly, they were calculating, and they had one goal in mind, to bring Ilaria back, no matter the cost. "We don't have much time," Ryker muttered, his voice low. Ilaria's eyes were cold, determined. "I know. They won't stop until I'm either dead or captured." Ryker looked at her, his jaw clenched. "We're not going to let that happen." Without another word, they moved, silently, swiftly across the rocky terrain, staying low and out of sight. They reached the perimeter of the Jartha camp, where the flickering lights from their campfires cast eerie shadows. The air buzzed with tension, the crackling of fire punctuated by hushed voices and the clanking of weapons being prepared. Ryker could feel the presence of the Jartha warriors closing in around them. A few steps, just a few more moments, and they would be caught. He knew they had to act fast. "We can't fight them all," Ilaria whispered. "We have to get out of here, Ryker." But Ryker, always the hunter, was already moving. "No, I'm not leaving without you." With that, he surged forward, using the cover of night to dart toward the first group of soldiers. His blaster fired, the shot hitting one of the soldiers square in the chest. The Jartha warrior went down with a guttural scream, crumpling to the ground in a heap. Ryker didn't wait for a second shot. He was already on the move again. Chaos erupted around them. The remaining soldiers scrambled to their feet, weapons raised. Ilaria was beside him in an instant, her eyes glowing as she extended her hands. The air seemed to bend around them, and Ryker watched in awe as she manipulated time, freezing a handful of the Jartha soldiers in place. The world slowed, their movements grinding to a halt as Ilaria altered the flow of time itself. It was as if she had suspended them in a pocket of nothingness, allowing Ryker to advance. But even with time on their side, they were outnumbered. A second group of Jartha warriors came charging from the opposite direction, their weapons drawn. Ryker heard the distinctive hum of plasma blades coming to life, and he knew that time manipulation wouldn't last forever. It was a powerful weapon, but it was not invincible. Ilaria's concentration wavered for a split second, and the warriors unfroze, their movements sharp and precise. One of them lunged toward Ryker, its blade cutting through the air with terrifying speed. He barely had time to react, ducking under the swing and rolling to the side. His blaster fired in retaliation, the blast searing through the Jartha soldier's armor and sending him crashing to the ground. But Ryker didn't have time to savor the victory. The others were closing in, and the fight was intensifying. Ilaria, too, was in the thick of it. Her abilities allowed her to move with lightning speed, freezing her enemies long enough to strike. But the physical toll on her was beginning to show. Ryker could see the strain in her face, the beads of sweat on her brow, the way her breath came in labored gasps as she twisted the fabric of time to protect them. One Jartha soldier, a towering, hulking figure, charged at Ilaria, his eyes burning with fury. Ryker was too far away to stop him, but Ilaria didn't hesitate. She raised her hands and time shifted again, the world slowing around the soldier. The warrior stumbled, his movements slow and disoriented, but he was still strong. He swung his blade, and it grazed Ilaria's arm, leaving a deep, bloody gash. A cry of pain escaped her lips, and Ryker's heart sank. Rage surged through him. He couldn't let her get hurt again. With a primal roar, Ryker lunged forward, tackling the soldier to the ground. His hands gripped his warrior's throat, his body fueled by adrenaline and fury. He could feel the power of his own muscles pushing him forward, his strength magnified by desperation. The Xartha soldier struggled, his hands pushing against Ryker's, but Ryker didn't stop. He twisted, and with a final brutal motion, he broke the soldier's neck. Ilaria staggered back, clutching her bleeding arm. "Ryker, we need to go." Ryker didn't wait for a response. He grabbed her by the waist, pulling her into his arms and retreating toward the nearest rock formation. The Xartha soldiers were still coming, but their focus shifted to the larger group that had broken through the perimeter. They were distracted for just a moment, and it was all Ryker needed. "I'm not leaving you behind," Ryker grunted, his voice strained as he half-carried Ilaria. "We're getting out of here." But the battle was far from over. A large explosion ripped through the camp behind them, throwing up a cloud of dust and smoke. The Xartha had set traps, and the shockwave sent both Ryker and Ilaria sprawling to the ground. The dust cloud clouded their vision, and Ryker felt the weight of it pressing down on him. Through the haze, he saw the silhouette of a Xartha general, his figure imposing and menacing. This was the leader, the one Ilaria had feared most. Ryker's heart skipped a beat, and he pulled himself and Ilaria to their feet, readying for the final showdown. The general was not alone. Two more elite warriors flanked him, their armor adorned with symbols of power. Ryker's mind raced as he assessed their positions. They were well-trained, and this would be their toughest fight yet. "I will not let you escape, traitors," the general boomed, his voice deep and commanding. He raised his plasma blade, the weapon humming ominously in the air. Ilaria gritted her teeth, her power flickering erratically. "We have to end this now, Ryker." The general moved first, charging with the force of a bull, his blade aimed at Ilaria. But Ryker was ready. With a roar, he leapt in front of her, his blaster raised and firing. The blast grazed the general's shoulder, but it didn't stop him. The general swung his plasma blade with brutal precision, narrowly missing Ryker's torso. Ilaria, her energy nearly spent, staggered forward, her hands raised. She manipulated time once again, slowing the general's movements just enough for Ryker to close the distance and strike with a lethal combination. A powerful punch to the general's gut, followed by a swift, precise shot to the head, sent the Xartha leader to the ground, his body crumpling with a finality that sent a ripple through the remaining warriors. But there was no time to celebrate. The last of the Xartha soldiers charged, and Ryker and Ilaria stood side by side, weapons ready, their bond stronger than ever. They fought back to back, a perfect partnership, each move in sync with the other. Ilaria's time manipulation and Ryker's raw strength created a force that the Xartha could not overcome. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the last of the Xartha soldiers fell. Ryker stood over the battlefield panting, his body covered in sweat and blood. Ilaria, though injured, was standing beside him, her chest heaving, but her eyes alight with something new. Relief and perhaps a glimmer of hope. "I guess we're not dead after all," Ryker said, his voice rough. Ilaria looked at him, a tired smile flickering on her lips. Not yet, anyway. Together they surveyed the wreckage of the battlefield, knowing that while this fight was over, their journey had only just begun. The dust from the battle still lingered in the air, swirling like a thick fog as Ryker and Ilaria slowly made their way through the aftermath of the skirmish. The silence that followed was deafening. Every breath they took felt heavier than the last, every step a reminder of how close they had come to losing everything. The Xartha warriors were defeated, their bodies scattered across the battlefield like discarded chess pieces. But Ryker knew that the real fight wasn't over yet. They had one final obstacle to overcome, the very thing that had brought them here in the first place. Ilaria's arm, though still bleeding from the earlier strike, was wrapped tightly in a makeshift bandage. But she didn't slow her pace. Her expression was unreadable, her mind clearly miles away as she stared ahead, her steps purposeful despite the exhaustion that weighed heavily on both of them. Ryker knew she was calculating, thinking through the aftermath, But he also knew she was hiding something, something more than just the pain from her injuries. "Ilaria," Ryker began, his voice softer than he intended. "We're not done yet. You know that, right?" She glanced at him, but didn't stop walking. "I know." He frowned, his mind still processing what had just happened. The Jartha were a proud, disciplined race, but even they had their breaking points. The fact that they had fought so fiercely meant they had more to lose than they were willing to admit. But what did that mean for Ilaria? What was left for her after all this? The battle for survival was one thing, but the battle for her place in this galaxy was another. "I don't know where we go from here," Ryker admitted, his words carrying the weight of everything they had endured. "But I do know one thing, I'm not leaving you." Ilaria's gaze flicked toward him, and for the first time since they'd met, Ryker saw a crack in her armor. There was something vulnerable in her expression, something raw. She didn't respond immediately, and Ryker wasn't sure if it was because she was processing his words or because she didn't believe them. Finally, she stopped walking and turned to face him, her silver eyes filled with an intensity that pierced through him. "I don't need saving, Ryker. I never did." He took a step closer, his eyes locking with hers. "I'm not here to save you. I'm here because I want to be." And maybe that's the difference. Ilaria's breath hitched, her chest rising and falling as if she had been holding something in for far too long. Her voice softened, almost as if she was speaking to herself more than to him. "I've spent my whole life running from the truth, running from my power, running from who I am. But now, I don't know how to stop. I don't know how to just be." Ryker reached out, gently cupping her cheek with his hand. He could feel the tremor in her skin, the warmth of her touch seeping into his palm. "You don't have to run anymore, Ilaria. Not from me, not from yourself. You're not alone." The words hung between them, a fragile bridge connecting two people who had been shaped by pain, loss, and fear. Ryker had spent his life running from the demons of his past too, but for the first time, he didn't feel the urge to run anymore. Not from her, not from the possibility of something more. Ilaria looked up at him, her eyes flickering with the faintest spark of hope, a flicker that had been absent since he first met her. It was a fleeting thing, but it was enough. "I don't know how this works," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't have to know," Ryker replied, his voice low and steady. "You just have to take it one step at a time. With me. Together." Ilaria nodded slowly, her gaze dropping to the ground for a moment before she looked it up again, the weight of her power and her past still pressing down on her but not crushing her. She wasn't running anymore, but as they stood there, a new threat emerged from the shadows. The ground beneath it began to tremble, and a deep, guttural roar echoed through the valley. Ryker's instincts went on high alert. He quickly stepped in front of Ilaria, his blaster drawn, ready for whatever came their way. From the darkness, the figure of a Jartha warlord emerged, larger than the rest, clad in thick, reinforced armor. He carried a weapon that crackled with energy, a weapon capable of devastating destruction. He was the one who had ordered Ilaria's exile, the one who had pushed her to the brink of this rebellion. Ryker knew he was facing the Jartha's true leader, the one who would stop at nothing to see Ilaria destroyed. "Coward," the warlord sneered, his voice booming. "You think you can escape your past? You think you can change what you are? You are nothing but a tool, a weapon to be used. And now you will pay the price for your insubordination." Ryker moved into a defensive stance, positioning himself between Ilaria and the warlord. "You won't touch her." The warlord's eyes glowed with malevolent amusement as he swung his weapon forward, releasing a wave of destructive energy that shot toward them like a streak of lightning. Ryker dove to the side, pulling Ilaria with him, just as the blast hit the ground where they had been standing. The explosion sent debris flying in every direction, and Ryker felt the shockwave hit him, knocking the breath from his lungs. But Ilaria wasn't done. As the warlord advanced, she stepped forward, her hands glowing with a dangerous light. She was tired. Her power had been drained, and she had used so much of it already. But there was a fire in her now, something deep within that refused to be extinguished. "I've been running from you for too long," she said, her voice steady despite the weakness in her tone. "But no more." With that, she raised her hands and twisted time around the warlord, slowing his movements, freezing him in place just enough for Ryker to gain the upper hand. But it wasn't enough to defeat him entirely. The warlord broke free of her hold with a roar of rage, swinging his energy blade at Ryker with unmatched force. The battle was fierce, and Ryker's every move was a dance of survival. He dodged, ducked, and countered, using his quick reflexes to avoid the warlord's powerful strikes. But Ilaria wasn't just a passive observer anymore. As the warlord closed in on Ryker, Ilaria's silver eyes burned with intensity, and she tapped into the full extent of her power, manipulating time around the warlord, bending it in on itself. The warlord's attacks became sluggish, his movements distorted as if the very fabric of reality was warping. Ryker saw his chance. With a shout, he lunged forward, catching the warlord off guard and striking him with a final deadly blow. The Xartha warlord collapsed, his weapon clattering to the ground, defeated. Ryker stood over him, his chest heaving with exertion. But it wasn't just the battle that had ended, it was Ilaria's fear of her past. In that moment, Ryker knew that they had both won. They had faced their demons together and had come out stronger on the other side. Ilaria walked up to him, her eyes tired but full of something new. "Peace. It's over," she said, her voice low but confident. Ryker nodded, his heart still pounding, but in a way that felt different now. "It is. And now we can finally live without looking over our shoulders." Ilaria reached out, placing a hand on his chest, feeling the rhythm of his heart beneath her palm. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Ryker smiled, his hand gently cupping her face. "You didn't need me to save you, Ilaria. You've always been strong enough on your own. I was just here to remind you of that." And in that moment, amid the wreckage of battle and the ruins of her past, Ryker and Ilaria found something even more powerful than survival. They found each other. No longer bound by fear, no longer running from the past, they stood together, ready to face whatever future awaited them. The galaxy was vast, full of uncertainty and dangers, but for the first time they felt ready to meet it, side by side. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button to support our channel, and stay tuned for more epic stories like this. Don't forget to leave a comment below with your thoughts on the story. We'd love to hear from you. Let us know where you're listening from too. We love hearing from fans all over the world.